Isaac Newton was born in 1643. That makes 2023 the 380th anniversary of his birth, so that's pretty exciting. And to celebrate, let's look at what happened on July of 1687. That is exactly 380 years ago today. What happened on July of 1687? Well, Isaac Newton published his Principia, one of the most important books ever written. Maybe the most important book ever written. It introduced ideas like gravity and orbits and calculus and laws of motion. It was a group of scientists and natural philosophers who met together to share their findings. The second section explained how objects attract each other with a force proportional to their masses and the distance between them. Basically, gravity. These diagrams are very detailed and beautiful. They have this kind of vintage scientific feel that we associate with old books about space or chemistry. These are his thoughts and corrections and additional problems that he came up with. He famously wrote in the margin of one page, "I think this proposition may be demonstrated without difficulty." And next to that, "I have not yet received any light in this matter, nor do I think the difficulty is in this demonstration." These little notes are so human. They remind us that even geniuses struggle with things. It was translated into Latin, French, German, Italian, and even Russian. It was read by scientists all over the world, and it inspired generations of scientists, including some of the greatest minds in history. It changed our understanding of the universe. It turned science into a profession. It made space travel possible. It explained how machines work. It laid the foundation for engineering. It helped us predict eclipses and comets and the paths of planets. It even helped us understand how music works. Seriously, the effects of this book are impossible to overstate. And this is because we used to draw pictures of things we didn't see, like the inside of a clock or how we thought a lightning bolt looked. When you're solving problems, you're learning by doing. You're not just memorizing facts for a test. And Brilliant has thousands of lessons, everything from geometry to AI logic, probability, and more. This is a great place to start. Their courses are fun, interactive, and really well designed. I've learned a lot of stuff on Brilliant. I recommend you try it out. The earliest review was by a guy named John. He was the first astronomer royal. Newton and Flamstridge had a complicated relationship. It is amazing to me that people are just now noticing this story about how Newton supposedly discovered gravity. It's a good video. Also, check out my quantum physics playlist. It explains how the universe works on the smallest scales. At first, Newton would send Flamstridge his papers so that he could check them and help him get published. But then he got jealous that Flamstridge gave some of Newton's data to another scientist to use in his own work. And later, Newton insulted Flamstridge in print and blamed him for misidentifying a star. Anyway, Flamstridge reviewed the Principia and said that it was the most ingenious piece of writing he'd ever seen. He thought it would take time for people to appreciate what Newton had done. It's hard to overstate how mind-blowing this book was. It was like nothing that had come before. Or in this case, how we thought gravity worked. Halley was an astronomer who predicted a total solar eclipse that occurred in 1715. Isaac Newton was familiar with the work that went into the print. He called it the greatest and most important work that has appeared in our time, adding that it would probably be read 100 years from now with no less admiration than Archimedes' works are now. He also noted that this book would make Newton famous all over Europe. Halley was right. A century later, physicists were still reading the Principia. It made Newton famous, but it also changed science forever. We didn't know what atoms were, or what particles or fields were, but we knew something was happening between the Earth and the apple, and we tried to describe that. He coined money for England, designed buildings and instruments, and did some alchemy. He spent very little time doing science. He was mostly interested in practical matters. He became the president of the Royal Society in 1705 and died in 1727. These illustrations are based on what we understood at the time. We now know that they're wrong, but they're still cool. And the third section applied these laws to planetary motion, showing how they could explain the orbits of the moon and planets around the Earth and the Earth around the sun. The dedication reads, "To the most ingenious and learned men of the Royal Society, Sir Isaac Newton, sometime student, now fellow of Trinity College in Cambridge, humbly inscribes this work, which he hath composed with great labor and at great expense, not for the sake of gain or reputation, but only that the society might be informed how far he has been able to discover the progress of this most noble science." So he's basically saying, hey guys, here's what I've been up to. Let me know what you think. And for the first time ever, it described the universe as working according to mathematical laws. It changed our relationship with the universe from one of magic and mystery to one of science and engineering. We went from wondering how things work to being able to make them work. The effects of this book are impossible to overstate. So here's a story of the Principia, how it came together and how it changed everything. Now, I've talked about Newton before. There's some footage of me falling into a black hole on my channel. But I want to emphasize just how weird it is that we have this one person who is so responsible for so much. Like, if you want to understand how the world works, Newtonian physics is basically where you start. This guy was responsible for that. He discovered calculus independently from scratch. He developed classical mechanics. He defined gravity. He explained how telescopes work. He showed how the planets orbit the sun. He helped invent calculus differential equations. He helped develop the scientific method, just to name a few of his accomplishments. He literally created modern physics, and he also invented the cat flap. This guy did all of this between the ages of roughly 23 and 35. He completed his masterpiece, the Philosophiæ Naturalis Principia Mathematica, when he was just 34 years old. This is insane! He wrote it while living with his mother after getting kicked out of Trinity Hall, Cambridge, for eating too much cheese and making a mess. Not actually kicked out, but like asked to leave. The book took him 8 years to write. It was self-published, which means that he paid for it himself, and it was not a bestseller. In fact, it sold only 6 copies in its first year, but these were extremely influential copies. It was dedicated to the Royal Society, which is an organization founded by the English mathematician John Vallis in 16. The book was divided into 3 sections. The first part dealt with the laws of motion, including his famous 3 laws, which include things like inertia and action and reaction. The book had diagrams and illustrations, many of which were done by John Collins, a member of the Royal Society and one of those early adopters of the scientific method. Newton also wrote in the margins of his own copy of the Principia. Now, when the book first came out, it wasn't a hit, but there were several reviews. The next review was by a guy named Paul Hallett. After publishing the Principia, Newton went on to become the warden of the mint and then master of the mint. The Principia was reprinted many times during his lifetime, and it quickly became a bestseller. And that's why I love Brilliant. They teach you math and science interactively, which is the best way to learn. If you liked this video, you should watch the one about the apple tree.